Hi everyone, this is Amy with Amy Astro, and today's video I'm going to show you how I took photos of the Milky Way with silhouettes and processed them. If you like this video, please subscribe below and select the alert bell so you know when I upload a new video. Like and share with your Astro friends, and follow me on Facebook as Amy Astro so you can see all my Astro adventures. Now last week I attended the Peach State Stargaze party in Sharon, Georgia. It took me 2 trips to get there with all of my gear. I did pack the kitchen sink in there somewhere, and thankfully I live fairly close to the event. So, coming back and forth was not a big issue for me. The ride out there was fairly uneventful, just some backcountry roads, small towns, and trains. And Friday was a beautiful and hot Georgia day. Thankfully, it was one of the dry days of the week while I was out there. I spent a couple hours building my kingdom for the week: the tent, canopy, chairs, coolers, and of course my power distribution system. Friday night was catching up with friends and relaxing as we were clouded over, we had cloud cover. And Saturday we woke up to rain. And when I say rain, I mean lots of rain. I had a mini river running through my campsite, and I was very glad that I packed my wellies. Again, on Saturday night was another perfect night for socializing since we had no stars. Sunday night was our first clear opportunity to catch stars. The only downfall was heavy dew in the air that, as the sun dipped below the trees, everything was quickly saturated. Still, we set up, and you could hear a pin drop on the field as we all set up. We are a very intense group while we are preparing for first light. For my first hour, all was well. Polar line, guiding, focus was all spot on, and I started imaging Pleiades. They started out looking good, but after about an hour or so, my images started to look bad. And when I say bad, they looked really bad. Dew had settled in my gear somewhere along my train. I checked the outside lens, and then I checked the field flattener, and then I realized it was all the way down at my sensor. And when I went back out there and looked, I forgot to put the dew heater on my scope. Of all the rookie mistakes for me to make, but I did it. Oh well, the following day we hired a witch to scare our clouds away. She worked really well during the day, but at night I think she left her post to go flying underneath the clouds. Our witch became our mascot for the week, and folks were even taking family portraits with her, which was kind of cute. So we were treated to a couple of really beautiful sunsets and sunrises during the week. Tuesday and Wednesday nights were both clear, so it wasn't a total washout for us. I managed to get enough data on Tuesday and Wednesday night for the Iris Nebula. I believe it's enough that I should be able to get a fairly decent image of it. During the days I walked the grounds, I reacquainted myself with some old friends, and I made some new ones. They have a nice memorial area for landowners who have passed away with a statue pointing towards Polaris. We had some really great speakers this weekend. We learned how to image the sun. We learned about the Parker Solar Probe, about radio astronomy, and all about the Apollo space program. These were some really great speakers. They did a fantastic job. I set up a table to sell some of my images that I had printed on metal. They did pretty well. I was very happy. They sparkle in the light. And check out that astrophysicist Barbie. A friend of mine sent that to me this week. It was I was very excited to find it in the mail. I had never seen it before, and it was the talk of the table, and everybody tried to buy my Barbie. The event everybody was looking forward to the most was the big door prize giveaway. Everyone was very excited with all the vendor donations. We had donations from Primaluce, Skywatcher, Celestron, Cloudbreak Optics, Farpoint Astro, Agea Astro, Icer Cooler, Orion, Land, Sea, and Sky, and Ursa Major. So I've got my ticket. Just wish me some luck and hopefully I'll win something. And I'll tell you what, the kids loved their prizes. We gave away some first telescopes and some books and puzzles, and those grins were totally priceless. And everybody was excited about their gifts. It didn't matter what you were getting. So now that I've taken you guys down my memory lane of what I did at the Peach State Stargaze this year, it's time for me to get back on topic and show you how I created these images of the silhouettes with the Astro folks with their telescopes and how I edited them. So get ready and let's get started. So we're over here in Lightroom and I have imported the images that I have taken. And let me tell you a little backstory about these images. Wednesday night, all my gear was running great and I saw that the Milky Way was showing up really well. So I went up the hill with my Nikon camera and tripod and I thought I would see if I could find anything cool to take photos of. And what I saw when I got real low to the ground and looked up were all of these silhouettes of the gentlemen with their telescopes, and it was just something really cool. And to my happy surprise, when I approached one, I said, "Hey, can I take your photo?" And they were like, "Well, hell yeah, come on, let's take it." So, and they posed and they came up with better angles and we had just a lot of fun with it. So everyone meet Harry. Harry is an older gentleman who is full of one-line jokes. He is so much fun to hang out with. But he has this big daub that looks like a cannon launching space dust. Or we could say that it is eating the Milky Way. Now, for a couple years now, he has been accusing me, the astrophotographer, of sucking up all the photons. I kind of think he's doing some sucking up with this big daub. So, enough of that, and let's see where we can make this an image that we're proud of, that we want to print and hang on the wall. So what we've got here is we've got the foreground is somewhat visible, and I'm kind of going more for a silhouette look. I've also got the back end of Harry's van sitting here at an angle, and this is due to the fact that I'm using a very wide angle lens. I am shooting with a Nikon D850, and I have a Nikon lens on it that is a 14 to 24 millimeter with an f2.8 aperture. This image was taken at about 10 seconds, and I chose 10 seconds because I wanted as little drag in the stars as possible, but still accomplish an image. And my ISO is way up there in the 5000 range, and that's because this camera can handle the high ISO very well. I am thoroughly impressed with this. And I'm at 17 millimeters. Why 17? Well, when I was doing my focus, I bumped it up to 17. No big deal. I still have plenty of image to work with. So let's come over here, and the first thing I would like to do is my lens correction. And it automatically knows what lens that I used. It comes in through the metadata. And so I select remove chromatic aberrations and enable the profile correction. And if we turn it off and turn it on, you can see that it bowed the image out some. So it was correcting what the lens did to it. So let's get started right up here at the top of the menu system. We have our basic tab in Lightroom. And this one gives us our general adjustments that we use. To start off with, we've got my white balance, and currently it's at 3000 Kelvin, and this is what I'd set my camera up to be. I typically go with the 3000 to the 3500 range because I like a bluer tone to my image. Now, exposure. Chances are I'm not going to want to adjust this too much, but let's slide it either way and just get an idea of what it does. So I don't want to darken my image. I really don't want to brighten my image, so I'm just going to leave it right where it is. But the contrast, when we pull it up, notice how the dark lanes up in the Milky Way look much sharper. But also, Harry down there with his daub becomes a little bit more of a silhouette, and it darkens the foreground. That's kind of nice. So let's go ahead and bump that up to about right there. Now, highlights. Highlights will brighten certain parts of the image. It brightens up that light pollution bubble, but it also brightens up some areas right here along the Milky Way that are kind of cool. So I think I'm going to do that more as a selective brush than an overall item. Because if I bring it down, I can get rid of this light pollution, which is kind of nice. Now shadows, if I bring it up, it's going to brighten the image and it's going to bring a lot of extra noise into that foreground. And if we take a look, you can see all the noise that just showed up by me bumping up the shadows. So I'm going to knock that back down, and I'm probably going to actually take it down just a little bit. Let's zoom out and see what it looks like. So at the beginning, and decreasing the shadows just a little bit. There we go. Now white will brighten up all the whites if we pull it over to the right, or it will darken things if we go over to the left. Now you'll notice all of a sudden some color started to pop out in the stars when I started removing some of the white. Now that's kind of neat. I'm going to bump it up just a little bit. Okay, and then our black, if I bring it to the right, I brighten everything up, and if I bring it to the left, I darken. Now let's continue with our silhouette thought process, and we will darken it some. There we go. And if we hit the slash key on our keyboard, we can see our before Lightroom and after Lightroom with all of our adjustments. So you can see if you like what you've done so far and if you want to change anything. But so far I'm going to leave that as it is. And let's minimize our basic tab. Now we have our tone curve. Just like in PixInsight, if you can make yourself a gentle S-curve if you like. There we go. Pull down the lower parts. And we can toggle it off. Whoops, need to close that. Off and on. Didn't make a whole lot of a change. You can see it darkened up some. Let's see what it does if we bring the brights up just a little bit more. There we go. I think that Milky Way is starting to pop out some. Let's turn it off and we'll turn it on. I like that. I'm going to leave it, and let's minimize that tab. Now this one is for color. And we can saturate some of this, we can desaturate some of this. It's really up to personal preference if we like. I think I would like to try to desaturate some of this red so it's more of a glow than an actual red. So I'm going to hit saturation, and I'm going to hit this little radio button, and when I take this, you see my cursor has turned into a little plus sign. If I put this plus sign on the red that I want to desaturate, click, hold, and pull your mouse down, you'll notice the sliders on the right are starting to adjust. And this is adjusting red and orange. And as we slide it down, our red is not being as red over there on the image. So I'm going to just take it easy with that and do a little bit. Let's turn this off, and you can see that red right there is pretty bright. And, whoops, and now, whoop, there's off. There's the bright. And let's turn it back on, and it's a little bit muted. That looks good. Split toning, not going to do any split toning today. But detail, we'd like to sharpen our image. But when we do this sharpening, it's going to sharpen the entire image, including all of the noise. So we do have to be careful with that. But I'm going to show you a trick how to minimize that. I'm going to zoom out. And Lightroom has these presets that are really nice. If you come over here, they've got one called Sharp and Scenic. I use this on most of my landscapes, and when I selected it, it adjusted all the sliders to what the preset would be. Now remember, I'm sharpening noise also, but this is how you can avoid it. They have this really cool tool called masking, and on your keyboard, if you select Option or Alternate and hold it down and click on the slider and pull it over to the right. Now you see my screen is white and it's slowly getting black. The white is what's being sharpened. The black is not. So you can see I'm starting to get some nice sharp edges around my tree line, around Harry and his dog, and the stars. And the further I pull it up, the less noise is being selected up there and the stars to be sharpened. So I'm going to leave it about right there. That looks pretty good. All right, my stars are nice and sharp now. Let's zoom in. Let's go ahead and go to 3:1. Get really big. So I'm going to show you what this does. The noise reduction selection. Under the luminance, if we bump this up between 20 and 30, somewhere in there, you'll notice everything in between will start to get mushed together and not as noisy. And that looks pretty good. You can get carried away and bring it up to 100, and it's going to look like a melted butter just ran across your image. Not exactly what we are going for. Now there's this other option down here called color. Now when you opened up your image in Lightroom, it automatically adjusted your color to 25. But that's not exactly how it came out of your camera. What if this slider was down at 0? What did our noise look like out of our camera? That's what it looked like. You've got some green, some magenta, and some blue hiding in here, and that is the color noise that's naturally occurring from our camera. And Lightroom went ahead and bumped this up to about the 20 range and neutralized that for us right out of the gate, which was pretty nice of them. Because if I had seen this to begin with, I might have been a little horrified. Now that looks a little bit too mute, so I'm going to bring this back down. Let's try 17. And where does it go from there? And sometimes these are just so subtle, it's really hard to see. Let's bring it down just a little more. I hope it's thinking. Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves here. There we go. Whoops, nope, still thinking. Am I done? Oh, I'm done. Let's fit it and let it think. And let's do a slash key for before and after. That's looking pretty darn good. I'm pleased with that. But when I'm looking at this, now I do know that these trees are further away than these trees are. But the optical illusion has me feeling like I'm kind of tilted. And of course Harry's van at this weird angle is not helping me at all. Now, I can use something that's called the transformation here. And if you choose this grid and you draw yourself a line along what you think should be vertical and what you think should be horizontal, it will straighten this image up. But it also adds some wonky things to it. It could clip a corner and all of a sudden it's all white. And now you've got to be creative with how you want to crop things, or if you're going to do a content-aware fill in Photoshop. But I think I'm going to leave it just the way it is. And ultimately, I'm going to very carefully eliminate the van from the photo altogether. And I believe I am also going to darken up some of these background cars just a little bit, but I'm going to leave some of this showing because that just adds a little atmosphere to my story. So let's minimize transform and let's go to our effects tab. Now this is where you can add a vignette, that really is way too early in this image to think about a vignette. Now there is this option called dehaze, and when I slide it over to the right, watch what it does up there to the Milky Way. It is adding extra contrast. And it's looking really cool, but it's also crunching up things around here. So be gentle with this. Now, if you have ever taken a photo outside and the sky is completely washed out and the foreground is okay, something that's really cool is you can take this dehaze on just the sky, and believe it or not, there are clouds up there half the time. And you can recover some of those clouds. You just have to be very careful with it. Don't get carried away. So let's minimize this. Now let's look at this adjustment brush where we can selectively choose where we want to put some details in. Now we can do this in Photoshop, or we can do some in Lightroom, but for right now let's do a little bit in Lightroom. Automatically, the last thing I used was dehazed, and it was at 29. And let's see, I can leave this at anything I want because I can adjust that in a minute. Now notice I have a brush here. The feathering is that outer circle, and what's being colored is on that inner circle. I can increase the size of this brush by using my square bracket, or I can decrease it with the other square bracket. But I think what I want to do, since I'm on dehaze right now, I'm going to paint in gently some of the dark area. Let's make it a little bit bigger and see how it looks. Now you may want to go ahead and check the Show Selected Mask Overlay, just so you can see where you've actually painted, because sometimes it's harder to see. Now if I was to paint over this red again, it will get darker and more of that dehaze will show through. So you have to be careful on stacking this up. Sometimes you can get carried away. So let's just go with that for right now. I'm going to turn off my overlay. There we go. And now I've got the dehaze slider. I can bump it all the way up and see if I like what it does. Or I can pull it all the way down. It kind of blaws it out there. Let's bring it up some. I like that. Let's create another adjustment brush. I'm going to double click on dehaze to reset it. I'm going to make my brush just a little bit smaller, and I think I'm going to work on the highlights. I'm going to just bring it up really high right now. I'm going to say show my mask overlay, and my highlights, I just want to brighten some of these little key areas in the Milky Way. Now at some point that red should be showing up when it catches up with me. All right, I see a little bit right there. There it is. A little slow. I think I am outliving my computer system here. I can almost see one in my future if I keep this up. All right, get some right there. I want extra right there. There we go. Let's turn this off. Okay. And now let's play with the slider and see what do we want to do. I definitely want more. And I think that's pretty good. I'm going to leave that right there. Let's grab another brush. And let's think about our highlights again, but let's think about this light pollution bubble. This is where last time I decided I wanted to probably pull some of these down. I turn on my mask. I'm going to use my square button, and I'm just going to give it a big swoosh across the bottom and see what happens. All right, let's turn this off. And let's play with the slider. See if I brought it all the way up. Let's see if it's going to catch up to me. It's supposed to make it brighter. Okay, now I can start seeing it happening. This is a little labor intensive on the computer sometimes. There we go. That looks good, but it kind of oranged that up some. I'm not too sure I like that. So let's just back off. There we go. And we will leave it right there. So what should we do next? Let's think about this foreground here. Do I want to do anything with that? Probably not. You know what? Let's do a new brush, reset our highlights, and let's think about darker and contrast. So I'm going to bump up contrast. I'm going to bump down the blacks. I've got my brush. I'll make it smaller. And let's just brush some in right here. Let it think for a minute. Oh, that's way too much. There we go. Trying to go subtle here. It's just not really cooperating. Let's bring this up just a little bit more. All right, I think I'm going to leave it right there for right now. Let's say we're done. And let's do the backslash here and say before and after. Not too bad. But let's go back to this angle. Not too crazy about it. Let's select this angle and let's just draw in what we think should be a horizontal line. There we go. That looks good. That straightened up our horizon some. And the other thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I know I need an 8x10 image. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to do a crop. It's going to give me the 8x10 aspect here. There we go. It almost feels too small, doesn't it? I'm losing a lot of the Milky Way. Got some of the ground. Let's just lose the bottom of things and see how that does. I'm going to go ahead and, oh, it's still thinking. I'm going to reset this angle just a little bit more. just so I can make this image a little bit taller. That's what I like. Let's say done. And let it refresh. This looks like our image so far, but you know what? I'm going to adjust that one more time. And let's pull it down some, because that's going to be an awful lot of empty space down at the bottom. And really the whole purpose of this image in my eyes is the sky and the silhouette. And I'm going to be darkening enough of this that it's not going to be much of a story. So let's say done, and let's take a look at it now. There we go. I'm going to leave it at this. And the next thing we are going to do is we're going to take it over to Photoshop. And to take it to Photoshop, you find your image down here in the reel, and do a right mouse click on it and say Edit in Adobe Photoshop. And as I do this, it is going to take this image with all the Lightroom settings and it will open it up in Photoshop. And we will be right back. Well, welcome back. We are now in Photoshop, and this is our image as we got it. And the first thing that I like to do is to make a background copy of my image, just in case I mess something up, but also to see where I started. So let's drag the layer and bring it all the way down to the bottom to this little piece of paper and let go, and that made a duplicate copy. And then I just go ahead and turn that off with the little eyeball. Now let's talk about this image. What do we want to do? Well, I know I want to darken this foreground up some. I want to get rid of this van. I want to eliminate some of these cars and bright lights, maybe desaturate this green light on the Dobbs some. So we've got our work cut out for us. But the first thing, let's address this van before we think about anything else. Now, we have a really cool command here, and it's called Content Aware Fill. Now let's use this lasso tool to start with. All right, you see I've got my little lasso. And what we want to do is, let's try, it's probably going to take us 2 attempts to get this right. So let's start with the top half of this van and draw a circle around it. And now we've got our marching ants. Now if you remember, we've got Shift Backspace or Shift Delete. This is what we use to fill. But instead of us using black, let's arrow down and use something called Content Aware. And sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. You'll have to play with it a few times to get it just right. But it is going to look at all the pixels around the outside of what's inside this box and see how it can fill everything in and eliminate what's inside that box. This is great for getting rid of sticks and power lines and all kinds of stuff like that. But let's say okay and see what it does. And cross your fingers we get this part on the first try. Not too bad. I'm going to do a Command or Control D to get rid of my marching ants. And let's zoom in on that just a little bit. Now you see what it did? It cloned some of the trees from over here to over there. They're not as dark, but that's okay. I have a way to fix that. So let's go all the way over and let's see if we can grab, this one's going to be trickier. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do a content aware fill on this one. But let's try it first. Do a Shift Backspace or Shift Delete, Content Aware, and then we're in a fill and say OK. Chances are, if this doesn't work this time or it looks kind of funny, I can use my levels to get rid of it. Since we're going for a silhouette, this isn't really that hard. Alright, well, it copied some of that red from over somewhere. Might be that shape. I might have rotated it some. Not too sure. Let's do a Command or Control D, get rid of our marching ants. And, oh, I see, it copied from down here to up here. But let's try another whack at this. And do our shift backspace, shift delete, and OK. And let's see where it goes from right now. This may not look impressive yet. Don't worry, it'll get there. Okay, Command D, Control D, gets rid of that. All right, not too bad, not perfect, but don't worry. All right, let's go over here and let's eliminate a car. And let's try to eliminate this guy right here. And close it up. Shift delete, shift backspace, fill, content aware, and OK. And if you don't like it, you can undo it. Not a problem. Hopefully it won't grab something from over here. I'd like it if it stole from up here and from down there. Not bad. I think I can work with that. Command D to turn off the marching ants, and Command Control 0 will zoom all the way out. All right, not too bad. Now let's show you how we get rid of where it looks kind of gray and smudgy. Let's go over here to our adjustments and let's go to levels. And here I want to take the dark and I'm going to bump it up some. Now look at what it just did. It just blackened everything down here. You don't even know there was a van or a car or anything unless you really carefully look at the duplicated trees. Trust me, nobody ever looks. All right, I'm going to darken this up just a little bit more. Perfect. Go back to my layers and we'll turn it off and we'll turn it on. Now I've got this nice glow going on. Off and on. I almost eliminated that car, which was kind of cool. Now I could copy some of my tree line and bump it over there if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to leave it just like that. And let's talk about this Milky Way. What would we like to do to it? I think I'm going to accentuate some of this dark. Now unfortunately the galactic core is already setting behind the daub, so it's not really in this image. And we don't have a lot of obvious dark lanes. And this is just a 10-second exposure. So you're not going to get a whole lot. But, oh look at that. When I did that levels, it did everything. Make sure that's what I really want. I'm almost tempted to. Let's try to put a gradient on here. I select my gradient. It's in the white to black, black and white. And if I hold down my shift key and grab in the middle and pull it down, whoops, Command 0 to zoom out. So whatever's black is not getting any of the levels. What's white is getting the levels. And that's actually not too bad. That helped me get rid of that light pollution, but I do kind of have a harsher line. So let's avoid that by making this line longer. Hold down the shift key, it keeps it a nice straight line. Now let's bring it down like that. Let's see. There we go, that feathered it out more. And if you don't like it, it's too much, you can always drop the opacity some. Alright, Command 0, zoom out. I want to see some of my edges here. There we go. There's my whole image so far. I'm liking it. But what would we like to do? Really quite hard to say, but I think I'm going to continue darkening this up just a little bit. Let's grab another adjustment and let's do brightness contrast, and I'm only going to play with the contrast. And let's bump this all the way up and see where it goes. And don't worry, even though I'm doing this heavy-handed right now, I'm not really doing it heavy-handed. Go back to layers, and if you do your shift delete or shift backspace, we're going to fill again. But now I want to fill with black and say okay. So I just hid that entire mask. If we come over here to white, yes, and grab ourselves a paintbrush. Alright, let's take our opacity. It's at about 47%. Our flow is about 82%. Let's use our square brackets to make the brush size smaller. Oops. Unclick there. smaller or larger depending on what you're doing. And this is for contrast, so I am just going to paint in some of these little veins that I would like to see a little darker. Now if we were in the core, this would be really cool. And just use your eye and your creativity. There's no right, there's no wrong. This is your image. You make yourself happy with it. And if others like it, it's a bonus. But what matters is, are you happy with what you did? I'm going to darken that up. Let's say square. Okay, I'm going to do a Command 0, make them bigger. Let's turn that off and turn it on. You can see what I've painted in here. I like that, but I could probably back off just a little bit. So I dropped the opacity some. Because you can go crazy. Let's see, let's work on some of this lights. I'll go back here to our adjustments. Let's go to brightness and let's brighten the whole image up some. Go back to our layers and Shift Backspace, Shift Delete, and fill that with black. That hides everything we just did. We've got our paintbrush, it's white, it's 47%, and let's just paint in. Say 47% is probably a little bit too much. Let's drop it down in the 20s. Now if you ever paint this on and you realize that you like it, but you feel like your edges were just too sharp and you want to soften them up, you can do a Gaussian blur on a mask. And that's really cool because sometimes you like what you did, but you need to back off. Like right here, I need to back off. Let's put a black brush on. And I'm just going to paint the black back on it to hide it some. Off, on. I think I want to hide it some more. I really got carried away right there. Let's do off and on. There we go. But let me show you how you can make this blurred some. Let's go, we're on our mask, go to Filter, go to Blur, and go to Gaussian Blur. And you don't want to blur it a whole lot because you can see your blur pattern, whatever's going on here. This is up at 882. Too high. Let's bring it down and let's just blur our edges roughly. Where am I? There I am. Bring that. I want to see what I'm blurring. And that's not so bad. If I had no blur, that's what it looks like. And if we soften it up some, that looks good. And we'll say okay. There we go. Now other things we could do, we could saturate parts of these, but I don't really think that's overly necessary. I do want to address this green light. So let's add another adjustment layer and let's do a hue saturation layer. And I'm going to use this button right here. I'm going to click on it and eyedropper that green. And it says it's in the greens. And let's take our saturation down just a little bit. And our lightness, do we want it darker? Do we want it lighter? I think I'm going to take it this way. It's just not quite as bright. There we go. I'm almost tempted to just clone it out altogether. The same with these two little red lights that are reflecting here in the back of the vehicle. And there's a green light over here. The reds are okay, but the green is a little distracting to me. So let's go ahead and I'll turn this layer on. For right now, let's hold down the alternate key and select this eyeball. And this is where we started our image from. It finished for Lightroom and now we're in Photoshop. And this is where it looks like right now. What do you think? Is it better or is it worse? And this is where you can tweak things to see, did I get carried away with that part? I kind of feel like I did. So choose that layer and bring it down some. But remember, we can also go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we can just blur that mask just a little bit more to make it a little more subtle. Let's bring it down. And let's go back to look at before and after. Before and after. I almost wish I still had some of that showing, but where did I lose that at? I bet you I lost it right here. Okay, let's select that mask, paintbrush. I want black because I want to show that area again. I want gentle. There we go. Just go on that telescope. I'd really just like to see it a little bit more. That's good. I like that. Because before, you can see I've got a little bit of black right there. It was darkened and I just couldn't see it. And I want to see it some. I think I'm going to brighten up this tint just a little bit. There we go. Now white, I think I'm going to leave it right like that. There we go. I think I'm happy with this image. Oh, let's zoom in on this. Let's go to our background copy and let's grab ourselves a Band-Aid. Make it small, and I'm gonna just Band-Aid over those right there so they're hidden. There's a stray hot pixel. We get those every now and then. Get rid of it. There's Jupiter hiding. It's getting ready to set for the winter. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that little light. I think I'm going to get rid of the green light. Band-Aid is wonderful. Now let's just take a close-up look at all this. Make sure there's no more hot pixels in here that pop out at us. Of course, thankfully in the stars, they're not really obvious. Now here's something. Is it a plane or is it a meteor? Now there was a meteor shower going on this weekend. I kind of see a little gradient of brighter and darker and brighter and darker. So I'm going to take more of a guess of a plane, but I really don't know. Okay, let's zoom out. One more thing. I have mentioned in other videos about an action set, and this is an action set that's online that you can purchase. It is called Astronomy Tools version 6.1 Photoshop Actions. Now, I found out about this tool set from Astronomy Backyard from Trevor Jones, and I went out there and I checked it out, and it's a little over $20. It is quite handy to use. And there are some features on here that I also use in my night landscape photography. And one here is called Less Crunchy, More Fuzzy. And that is referring to these stars. You notice how they got a little pixelated, a little blocky? It will actually select all my stars for me and add a little fuzz to them so they look a little more natural. So what I want to do, I'm going to turn off this bottom layer. I'm going to go ahead and merge these visible layers for right now. We use that with this little radio button and merge visible layers. So now I just have my before and after button here to look at. So there's before and there's after. Let's go back to our actions and let's select the less crunchy, more fuzzy, and let's go up. Let's do one more thing first. Let's make a duplicate copy of that layer so we can see what before and after looks like. All right, let's run. And it's going to do a whole bunch of steps. It'll take a little over a minute to happen. But you can see all these other options that you have when you're doing your astro photos, which is kind of nice. It will let you do some space noise reduction, some color gradients, really handy stuff. If you're a Photoshop editor for your astro, this is a handy action set to have. It's making copies, it's adjusting hues, saturation. All right, let's go back over here. And if you want it to be more powerful, then you run it again. All right, there's before and there's after. You can see it just kind of fuzzed it up just a little bit. It looks good. It's these little subtle things that people don't think to look at that really make a difference in an image. They may not notice it, that you've done it, but they'll notice it if you didn't do it. All right, so this is where I would leave my image. I would drop my logo on it and send it out to Facebook or to the printers. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed taking these images of all these gentlemen with their telescopes and the Milky Way. It was a fantastic week out there. Even though we got some rain and we had a lot of clouds, we had a lot of social time, and I learned a lot from these gentlemen. So if you ever have a chance to go to a star party, don't let clouds deter you from going, because it's more to it than just watching the stars. There's usually lectures and door prizes and just stories from everyone that's definitely worth listening to. So this is Amy with Amy Astro, and I am wishing you all some very clear skies in the future. And if you enjoyed this video, please take a moment and like it down below, subscribe, and hit the alert bell so you know when I upload new material. I hope to continue doing this with every Friday and having a new video for you. And if you have any suggestions or comments, please leave them below. I read every one of them and I respond to all of them. So thank you so much for your time. Until next time, clear skies, guys.